Hi there, my name's Ryan. This is a quick video to walk you through an experiment I ran today. We trained up a natural language classifier to focus on tone, emotion, and social cue signals. The original data was sourced from open source. You can get it from Kaggle. In this case, I used a bunch of TED Talk information. Um, Ended up with 2,400 rows representing each one of the talks. And I unpacked that into 250,000 utterances. What I went through and separated at end of sentence through a period or a question mark, and anytime I saw one of those, I created a new row effectively, which resulted in about 250,000 utterances there. I had to do a little bit of cleanup in the R code, but eventually ended up with a good sample set. I ran about 6,000 samples against the tone analyzer, or whatever. It took about 15 minutes, and when I got up to about 6,000 samples running off my local computer here, I hit stop because I thought that was a sufficient amount. And I went through those 6,000 samples that came out of the tone analyzer and filtered the result, looking for signals that had a higher amplitude than 0.6. So, for example, if you see something in here around, this is a pretty obvious one, I'm terribly unhappy, that came back from the tone analyzer service as probably 0.8, 0.9 amplitude confidence of sadness. So anything with high amplitude, high confidence signals, more than that I kept. Everything else I jettisoned, although I did hold on to 1,400 low amplitude signal utterances that were the most neutral among them. And that's what you see in the ground truth here. In addition, I added in, for a little color, 50 utterances from another ground truth on social cues. So this is the ground truth. It's available in the GitHub repo. As you can see, we've got some of the basics here around anger, disgust, and fear. And there's a few of these where I actually had a second dimension to it. In this one, a timid fear versus being a terrified fear. So there's more than just the sort of the five classes you might get out of the standard tone analyzer on here for those emotions. And then we've got a bunch of neutral utterances here as well. And then all the way to the bottom there are some social cues from another ground truth I added on to the end of that 1,400 or so. So, for example, I really need to go now is a social cue for an exit. This was an autism use case that we were poking around on. And then, a strong miscommunication if somebody's misunderstanding somebody else, that's in here as well. So I took this up and then trained up an NL classifier. Here's the code, which is also in the GitHub repo. Loaded these packages up. Of course, we need our credentials for NLC, username and the password, and there's other videos for that, which we'll put in there. These are functions to create the classifier, check the classifier status, delete the classifier. This is simply a bit of code to sort of clean up the results and to list all classifiers. Let's have a look here. And these are my classifiers that are active. And the one that we're interested in here is the one on the bottom, NLC ground truth emotion 3. This is what I used to train it. The classifier needed a name, which I assigned here in 115. The file, which it pulled up from the local directory, was ground truth emotion. And then the last one here, I've actually renamed that, so I'll make sure I fix that in the code. And the last one here is creating the classifier. And then once we have the classifier name, you can check on its status. When you first send your information up and get a 200 response, it'll say it's not ready, and in this case, about 10 or 15 minutes later, the classifier was available and ready for test. So let's take it out for a spin here. I have problems and I am sad. This should be a pretty easy one. And you can see our results from the NL classifier, that there's a 97% confidence that that's a sadness classification. Let's change this to blue and see what happens. And let's spell it right. And again, it's confident that we're you're the best bank on the planet. Somebody's really happy with their service, and there's a 79% confidence in joy. Dag nabbit, somebody was robbed and got their wallet stolen. Let's see what happens here. There's sadness here, lower confidence, but still there's a negativity in there, and somebody else here is bursting at the seams and is delighted with life. This is one of our extra joyful ones. Arguably, you could say this should be a euphoric class rather than a bog standard joy class. If that's the case, we could update the ground truth to add this to it as the euphoric one as well. Somebody asking about their taxes. Let's see this one. This is neutral language, not a lot of emotion that's in there, so that's as expected. And then somebody, they're asking if they're dense. They're totally missing the point. There's a strong signal in there of miscommunication. Again, the confidence is not super high here, 51%, but it got it right. And then creepiness is an uncomfortable social cue. Again, the confidence isn't super high, so we'd want to be updating our GT. But generally speaking, our first test here of this ground truth went pretty good. And let's finish off here by saying, I am so happy this demo went well. And let's hope we get the right finish here. There we are, joyful. So thanks for watching, and I'll post the link